All right. Welcome, beautiful souls, to another episode of the Faith Fitness Joy podcast. This is episode 132, A Whole Health Approach to Addiction Recovery. And I am your health coach and host, Rochelle Renee. And today I am joined by Dr. Pamela Tambini, who also has a podcast and does a lot of work in the substance use disorder treatment recovery space. So I am very excited to welcome her to the show today. I think you are going to absolutely love today's episode. But before we dive in, just a couple of quick things. First, thank you all to those of you who are subscribed to the podcast and the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate your continued support and tuning in every week. Also, if you like this podcast and you'd like to support the show, you can use the link in the description or in the comments here on Facebook to make a contribution of your choice if you like. And last but not least, if you aren't already, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this podcast and YouTube channel. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Pamela Tambini here to the Faith Fitness Joy podcast today. Welcome, Dr. Tambini.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on today. Like I said, I'm very excited to have you on today's show. And you and I talked a little bit about your background and what you do. And to the listeners, I know I've mentioned it here and there in the past, but I actually have a past working in behavioral health at the state level in California. So substance use disorder treatment is actually where I started my career, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So just another reason I'm really excited to welcome you on the show today, Dr. Tambini, and hear more about what you do. Also, I've been listening to the podcast. It's called Real Recovery Talk. So please check it out if you aren't familiar with it. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's really great, especially if you two are, if the behavioral health world, especially substance use disorder treatment and recovery, is something that's near and dear to your heart as well. And so, Dr. Tambini, you do some really amazing work in this space. From what we talked about in our initial conversation. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about what you do with the audience and a little bit about your program and also about the podcast?
Sure. So I am an internal medicine physician by trade, but I'm board certified in addiction medicine as well. A little background behind that, I grew up, playing sports, super involved in fitness. And so to tie those two together now, I really incorporate, fitness, nutrition, holistic wellness into treating people who suffer from addiction. Doesn't matter what type of addiction it is. We try to incorporate all those aspects into what we do every day to help people find different avenues in bettering themselves.
Awesome. So, I mean, that's one of the things that really struck me when we were talking. And I know that there's, to some extent, a lot of people probably have elements of this, but just treating the whole person and really looking at this from the perspective of, it's a component of your overall health and well-being and how it can support people long term, with the, recovery, since it is something that's, it's a chronic illness or disease, and it's a lifelong sort of a thing that, people are working through. So when did you begin working in substance use disorder or addiction recovery treatment? And kind of what led you to that?
So I started about, let's see, 8 years ago now, and working in the field. What led me into that was, growing up, my father experienced a lot of mental health issues, depression, anxiety, things like that, but eventually kind of trickled into a gambling use disorder. And there's a high comorbidity between gambling, addiction, and suicide, and eventually lost my father to suicide in 2012. So just, and at that time I was starting residency for, internal medicine. So that kind of changed the trajectory of my interest and my path and my, I guess, passion for helping people. So once I completed my internal medicine residency, I kind of changed I still do internal medicine, but really changed my focus over into addiction medicine and diving into that world and helping people.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm really sorry to hear about your losing your father that way. And I mean, it's one of those things that impacts so many people. And remember hearing early on when I was working in at the state level, like different statistics around just how many people are impacted and how many people know someone or have a very close loved one that's, struggling with some sort of whether it's mental health or a substance use disorder. And it's pretty staggering. And what I remember too with working in that space for a long time is it seemed like even in the jobs I was in, like coworkers and stuff, it seemed like most people there were there for similar reasons. We had, I know my family's been, impacted and had, people affected by it. And it just seems like it's one of those things that it's just so many people are affected by it and know someone who also struggles with a substance use disorder or a mental health condition or both. So it's just one of those things that's really, really widespread and has a significant impact on multiple levels. Um, so tell us a little bit about how you kind of integrated like what I always often refer to as the whole health approach, where thinking about the physical health, our body, our mental health, and our mind, but also the spiritual aspect, or kind of our soul. How do you kind of take that integrated approach and supporting people that are in addiction treatment and recovery? Kind of how did that evolve, and what does that look like in your programs?
Definitely. People in addiction, no matter what it is, or mental health, oftentimes kind of lose themselves, lose their purpose, and are lost in what they're doing and what's happening, and you lose control kind of everything around you. And the things that seem normal to us day to day, like a routine, going to bed at the same time, waking up at, like sleep hygiene,
Right,
nutrition, what we're eating, how we're eating, what we're putting in our body, how that fuels us, how that makes us feel inside, but as well as being connected with a community that surrounds you, that's a positive community. And so the way we treat patients and how we, like, our belief system is, you treat the patient, like you said, as a whole. So, physically, when people come in, no matter what it is, and even if it's people that are functioning, right?
yeah,
There's a lot of functioning addicts in this world, no matter what their vice is.
right.
We try to take things one by one, but like you said, the physical aspect and having the holistic approach, where just try to teach them, like, hey, what are the health benefits of just going outside into the sun and taking a walk and clearing your head, or going to sit by the lake or the ocean or the river and just taking in those elements and the natural things, endorphins you can get from. It doesn't necessarily have to be exercise, but it can just be something different than what your body is used to get that natural flow of dopamine and endorphins. Spiritually, addiction, it doesn't matter what you believe in or what religion you are. We always try to teach people, try to believe in something bigger than yourself. So it doesn't have to be AA, it doesn't have to be NA, it doesn't have to be God, but whatever that looks like for you, spirituality is huge, because if you can connect spiritually with something and believe in something bigger than yourself, it brings purpose. And when you have purpose, it kind of lays that like foundation for you to be able to start, making your way down a path that is better for you. And then the mental aspect, ties into all of that, because when you have community, when you have spirituality, when you surround yourself with people who are trying to achieve similar things as you have this support system that you didn't even know was there. But it also offers like accountability for
Mhm.
yourself. to keep checking in every day, to keep making sure you're sticking with your routine and your goals in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just love that because there's multiple aspects to us as people. And I think a lot of times, when you think of the substance use treatment or the addiction treatment, it's, very often very focused on treating the initial, disease, and that makes sense. But, you also hear, well, from my experience, with working in it for a long time even at the state level, one of the things I did a lot of was around research. And so, the nature of it being chronic and relapsing, and a lot of things contribute to that. Like, you get, especially when people have gone into a more intensive program, like something like residential, for example, and they go back out, and then it's like way harder because they're not necessarily prepared for all of the things they're going to get bombarded with. And so to have some of that built in is just incredible, I think, and so important. Because the other thing too, as I've gone more into like the inner healing aspect of our health, and some like how trauma is sort of this thread that's common in a lot of these conditions and other aspects of the mental health. So it's just, it's not as simple as just the disease, right? So I just love that you guys are taking kind of that more whole approach and looking at all of these other aspects of it. Um, so I guess one of my next questions would be, do you think that this approach has had an impact on preventing things like relapse among people who are in your programs or receiving the services in the way that you're providing them? And I don't know if you've ever looked at any kinds of comparisons and results with your programs and others or not, but just kind of would be interested in just your take on how this approach has had an impact on mitigating some of that, relapsing aspect of it.
Definitely. So we find it's very successful. There is a lot of, medical data showing that people that, exercise and have a routine and have the natural health effects that come along with it mitigates not only like relapse rates or things like that, but it mitigates health risk in general, whether it's cardiovascular risk, stroke risk, whatever that might be. So yes, it's helpful in the substance use industry, but like you said, we're trying to help people get past their addiction and to be healthy mentally and physically. So that's kind of what we try to instill in people. And actually, I work with a facility here in Florida, and it's pretty cool to see because they have multiple sites. So one site, it's inpatient. They don't have a gym. They don't have anything really. They'll take them on walks. They'll do like yoga, meditation, alternate therapies. But the other site has a full on gym with, they have people come in, they have them run classes with the clients, and it's really cool to see how everyone partakes, right? So if you have 50 people in a room, not every single person is going to want to do like workouts. Maybe they haven't worked out in their life before, but we still make them partake. And if you're not going to work out, at least show up and show support and be a part of the community and interact and learn how to support others and what they're doing. So it kind of teaches different things like that we're trying to hit on. But between the two sites, the site that actually has the gym and incorporates more of the exercise and the wellness and the more of the holistic approach has the longer length of stay of the two. And then, we get a lot of feedback after people leave that, hey, I'm a year sober now, and I really took to everything that you guys taught us and helping me create like a lifestyle change. Being able to learn how to make a routine. I know that sounds like pretty simple, but people with addiction don't have a routine. Their life is chaos, right? It's just constant go, 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 go. There's no, and even people who work in our field probably suffer the same thing. So routine seems so minuscule probably to a lot of people, but it's really important for people at the end of the day. So it's really cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's probably even beyond the substance use treatment service recipients that with the routine thing. I mean, one of the things I find with working with people and just like with health and fitness and establishing, habits and like I think, well, what I see with people is kind of like this trying to conquer all of it in one day kind of a thing, like trying to take on all of this change at once. And I'm going to eat better and exercise and drink just water and you can stop drinking and all this stuff. And it's like, it's overwhelming. And then usually you're kind of almost setting yourself up to fail in a way because you're trying to make too many changes at once versus, these kind of building these small changes over time. So it's like that whole behavior change process and helping people with those. I mean, it does seem very like, maybe straightforward or simple, but I think a lot of people kind of, in different ways, maybe kind of struggle with it to an extent. So I think it's very powerful to integrate that in the addiction treatment space and part of those programs in particular. So they have that foundation and they kind of know how to like manage that process for themselves.
Right.
And then I know you guys also have a podcast. Like I said, it's called Real Recovery Talk. And I've been listening to it leading up to you coming on the show. And one of the things I've enjoyed is, some of the guests are people who are in their own recovery path or who've gone through the program. And I think that's just incredible. I love that aspect of it, just being able to hear different people's stories and how they're coming, moving through it. So tell us a little bit about your podcast. How long have you been a part of that, and how often do you is your podcast published?
Okay, sure, definitely. So backstory, the reason why we started doing, so Tom and Ben, my co-host, started it about 7 years ago. I've been with them, I've known them for about 7 years. So they started it around the same time that we met. I've just become more involved over the last, year or so. But the reason why it originally was started was addiction and mental health is still, there's so much stigma surrounding it still in our, like in the world. And so we work in this field, and for us it's normal to talk about these things and to address them, but to the world it's not normal. And so the biggest thing for us is we want to break stigma, break barriers and give access to people who suffer addiction. But also one of our main things is also focusing on those who support or members or loved ones of people suffering addiction, because that's a whole nother like road with collateral damage that we are trying to educate people like that to help them through. Like you said, we all probably know someone who is in addiction or has an addiction, whether they're functioning or not functioning, or we know someone who's a loved one or a family member of someone struggling, and they're like, don't know what to do, at their wits' end. And so for us, that's why we started it, to share stories of not only people who have gone through it, but now we're trying to highlight family members and loved ones who are going through it and give them access to resources, because right now all our resources are to the addicts, to treatment centers, but there's not really anything out there for family members and loved ones. So we're trying to put out, information, guidance, open Q&As, things like that for everyone involved to help kind of spread the word and educate people.
Yeah, I think it's just fabulous that you guys are doing that. And it's true, and it still blows my mind even in 2024 how stigmatized it still is. I mean, I think we've come a long way from what I've seen from I started in like 1997 when I first started working in like basically doing research and answering a hotline in California's former Department of Alcohol and Drug Programs. So I was there for gosh, many years, and in behavioral health for most of my career. So and I've seen how it evolved and how far it has come. But again, it's just, even with all of that, it still kind of blows my mind that how much there's still a lot of stigma around it. I think part of it is maybe just a lack of awareness or not enough people talking about it. So I think the podcast is a great way to have like more awareness around that. And like I said, I've been listening to some of the episodes, and one of the ones I was listening to, I forget the exact name of it, but I think it was talking about how people with substance use disorder might manipulate you.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it seemed like it was geared towards people, like family members or friends, and like how you can navigate that and how you can help support or help them, but not fall into that trap where you're kind of enabling them potentially, because that sort of thing is happening with manipulation.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was definitely one of our biggest episodes. We've gotten so much feedback from people, addicts themselves, right? But also from family members and loved ones, because they're like, we're in this situation every day. We live it. It's a fight. What do we do? How do we do this? And it's a highly debated topic, tough love, uh,
yeah.
oftentimes, but there is a lot of good information out there, and we're just trying to help people either way and any way we can. But I think, breaking barriers and breaking that stigma is going to take a while, but we try.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's definitely a critical element to doing that, I think, to reducing stigma and just making it, just talking about it, raising awareness. And I love that you have the different angles too, people who are moving through their own recovery, but also, these kind of conversations or tools for people who maybe have family members or loved ones and they're not quite sure what to look for or how to navigate it. So that was some of the things I really enjoyed from the podcast, as I was listening to it. And I can imagine, just that how helpful that is for people to have something like that. So, because again, especially a lot of times, people's introduction to that aspect of it is when they get to a point where they're trying to get somebody help, or it's escalated to such a point that it's maybe more volatile and harder for the family to work together. So having things that can help people even recognize maybe where there might be a problem that maybe they aren't looking at or don't want to see or something like that. Um, so speaking of the podcast, and also you like you mentioned, having these programs, if people would like to connect with you or learn more about your programs or the podcast, how can they do that? Is there any, is there a website for the podcast or any of your other programs you'd like to share with folks?
Yeah, we have a website. It's just realrecoverytalk.com. And on there, we, post all of our YouTube episodes. We were doing 2 episodes a week. We've upped it now to 3 days a week, starting this upcoming week. And we also are offering, it's called the Family Reconnect program, and it's for family members or loved ones who are looking for more in-depth education, guidance, coaching, also to connect with other people going through the similar situation as them. Like, we're having cohorts of 10 people. And it's like, we call them sessions. So there's 12 sessions for people. It's a session is held once every 2 weeks, and it's with myself, hosted by, Tom, Ben, and I, the other co-hosts, to kind of go through 12 different things and, or aspect that people struggle with or need more education on, and how to help themselves. Because in order to help your loved one with addiction, you have to help yourself first. And oftentimes people lose that. So that's one of the programs we're offering that is on our website. And, like you said, our podcast is called Real Recovery Talk. It's on, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. So people can reach out to us that way as well. Our email address is on the website. So we're always accessible to people.
All right, great. Well, So I'll make sure we include those links so people can find that and check out the podcast. Again, it's called Real Recovery Talk. Highly recommend it to you, all you listeners out there. If you have not checked it out before, it's a great podcast. It's definitely something you'd want to check out. So again, I will include the links. That's kind of all we have for today's episode. Just want to thank you so much again, Dr. Tambini, for coming on today. It's been such a pleasure to have you on, and I just greatly appreciate what you're doing in the space for addiction treatment, especially like raising awareness and trying to reduce stigma. I think it's just so important, and I appreciate all the work you and your fellow co-hosts are doing in that space.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it. And you're doing some awesome work as well. And that's why we just wanted to connect with you. And, we appreciate the love and just want to keep helping people. So,
Yeah, that's what it's about, right? So, well, thank you again for coming on. Thank you to everyone who joined us live and for all of you tuning in to the podcast, whether it's on the podcast apps or on the YouTube channel. I will see you all in our next episode of the Faith Fitness Joy podcast. And as always, if you aren't already, please remember to like and subscribe. And thank you so much for tuning in today. And I will see you in the next episode. Have a great day. Thanks again.
bye.
Bye.